Welcome to Save on Plants.
Watering is key to a plant. Too much water and the roots will rot. Not enough water and they'll dehydrate. In fact, a lot of plants, when they don't get enough water, you won't even know for a couple months. They'll actually look perfectly fine, and this is a common problem, especially during late summer. The plants are looking good. The customers are starting to relax a little bit, enjoying their time off, and they really don't feel like watering their trees. And since they look good, why bother? When in fact it could take several months before the plants actually start to show signs of dehydration. So just because a plant looks good, it doesn't mean the amount of watering is correct. It could actually be too much or not enough. As we discussed in the planting video, the best way and the only way I would recommend is by having inspection pipes between your trees where you can place your hand down the pipe and test the soil to see if there is moisture at the same depth as the bottom of the root ball. If you have moisture at the bottom of the root ball, then you do not need to water. What we're going to do here is go through a little setup that we've used with quite a few of our customers, and it's worked out really well. At the top half of the slide, there's some green circles. These depict the plants that you've planted in your hedge. And in between those green circles, you see there's three small black circles. These black circles represent the inspection pipes that we have spoken about previously. And the black line underneath the green circles, running from left to right, that is the water line itself. We recommend purchasing some cheap white stripe black pipe or black hose from the Home Depots, Ronas, etc. Most of the home hardware stores will have these. Not very expensive, 10-15 cents a foot, very minimal. At the one end on the right side in our diagram, you would plug it with the plug, which is available again at Home Depot. Clamp it, again with a clamp from Home Depot, that's easily available. On the left side, you would have a connection to your valve at the outside of your house where you would turn the water on to supply your plants. Now at the trunk of every plant, you would have a very small hole drilled in the black hose. So you don't drill the hole until the hose is in place, so that you have the best location for that supply of water. In addition to having a hole drilled in line with every trunk of every tree, you're going to have a hole drilled by the big O pipe. The reason for that is you want that big O pipe to also get water, because you want a similar an atmosphere or environment for the big O pipe as you do for your trees. So that when it's dry at the bottom of your big O pipe, you know that it's also dry at the bottom of your root ball, and it's time to water your plants again. There's several benefits to this particular system. Number one, it's easy. You turn the valve on, they all get watered. And this is really important, especially as you get near the end of the summer and we start getting less motivated to actually do things like gardening. A lot of people get motivated at the start of the year, they get everything looking good, and then they want to sit back and relax, and that's understandable. But with this particular system here, you're not going to deprive the plants of the water that they need, because it's going to be so easy to do. Another thing is, if you take off for a weekend or a week and you leave the job to someone else, they're more likely to give the plants enough water, because all they have to do is turn the valve on, have a cup of coffee, then turn the valve off. Another benefit is that you're not watering the weeds. When you water the whole area, you tend up watering things you really don't want to water. Here you're watering directly at the trunk of the tree, so the benefit of that water goes right to the trunk of the tree and not so much to the area around it where the weeds would want to be growing. You can also cover this black hose with mulch so that you don't notice it, but don't cover the actual hole itself for two reasons. One, you might restrict the flow, and two, you may not be able to tell if it's even flowing. It may get plugged up, in which case you'll have to clear it. Always start with very small holes, because you can make the holes larger, you can't make them smaller. At the very bottom of this page, what we have here is an end view of the row, and you'll see that the black hose is at the bottom right with a blue arrow pointing towards the trunk. The blue arrow depicts the water coming out of the hose hitting the trunk. Most people don't think about watering their plants just before winter time. However, it is very important to give your plants, especially evergreens, an extra shot of water just before winter. The reason being is that the root system may freeze solid through the winter and not be able to draw up water for the plant. And this is why you'll get winter burn after a long cold winter. The air moves through the needles, drying them out, which are not pulling up enough water out of the frozen root system. It's always best to water in late November, just before we start getting sub-freezing weather. Even if the ground is damp, give them an extra shot of water. Mulch over this root area is very important. The mulch will keep the heat in as well as the moisture. Never use rocks over the root area of any of your plants. The rocks will conduct heat away from the ground and at the same time the root system. Not a good use of rocks whatsoever. Only wrap trees if there is a windy area. Wrapping a tree can do as much damage as good because it can overheat in the wintertime and encourage early growth before the plant is ready in May. So you only wrap a tree if it's windy, and when you do wrap the tree, don't have the material touch the needles itself. What you should do, the best way, is to actually have posts away from the plant and then wrap the post with your burlap material. This will slow down the wind before it hits the needles, and again reducing the amount of drying that the leaves get. But the first two things that are the most important and easiest to do are water before the winter and place mulch over top of the root system. A common question that we're asked is, how often should I be watering? Well, this is really difficult to answer because everybody's soil is different, everybody's drainage is different. This is why we really encourage people to install inspection pipes near their plants where they can actually put their hand down to the same depth as the root ball and feel the soil to see if it's moist or not. But as a general rule, it's always better to water heavy and not often. In other words, give it a real good watering and then let the roots dry out, and then you can water again. The reason that you want to water heavy but not often is that the roots will chase the water down and they'll become stronger. It's also good for the roots to dry out a little bit because that's what forces them to stretch and look for water. So it gives you a healthier plant. The worst thing to do is water often and light. In other words, you're only watering the very surface of the soil. The roots, if they do try to reach out at all, are actually going to reach the surface, which will create a very weak plant. And this is why during windstorms, you'll see some very large established trees get ripped right out of the ground, and you'll see that the root ball is really not that big. What has happened is that when that tree was young, it probably got infrequent watering, and the roots didn't get established and go down deep. So you don't want to do that with your plants. You want deep roots. The best way to do that is when you do water, water heavy, and then let it dry out a little bit. So even when you're checking with your hand at the bottom of the inspection pipe, even just a little bit of moisture, you don't have to water. Let it go dry, and then you flood it. Water heavy, don't water often. Bonemeal and Calphos. These are two root stimulants that we really encourage. They are excellent. We've tried them for several years now. We've used them in comparison with Mycorrhizer, which is also a very good product. We've had basically the same results whether we're using Mycorrhizer or Bonemeal with Calphos. The difference is the cost. Bonemeal and Calphos cost about 20% the amount of Mycorrhizer, and with the same type of results. So we are very strong supporters of Bonemeal and Calphos. For example, with a very large tree, say a 15-gallon size tree, it may cost $4 to use Bonemeal and Calphos, and you'll get amazing results because of this. If you're to use Mycorrhizer, you could be using as much as $20 or $25 worth of material for the same type of results. In addition to it, Bonemeal and Calphos is 100% totally natural, totally organic. It's an excellent way of getting your roots started on your plant. It is a type of fertilizer, except it does not promote plant growth, strictly root growth. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about fertilizers that produce the plant growth. What's important is that during the first year, you want to get the roots going, and then you're going to use the Bonemeal and the Calphos during the first year. The second year is when you would start applying a time-release fertilizer. While both Bonemeal and Calphos are applied at the time of planting, they are applied differently. The Bonemeal can be applied directly on top of the root ball, as it dissolves easily and will run through the root system. You can also place Bonemeal at the bottom and the sides of the root ball. Generally, I would use about half the amount on the bottom and sides, and half directly on top of the root ball. The Calphos, in contrast, would be used at the bottom and the sides almost entirely. and nothing would be used on top of the root ball. The reason for this is Calphos does not actually dissolve. The roots have to come into the molecules of the Calphos as they're spreading out. So placing it on top of the root ball is not as effective as placing it at the bottom and on the sides along the root ball. As you add the dirt back in, you mix in the Calphos with that particular soil. There are many different types of fertilizers. Some of them are short-term release, and some of them are a longer time release formula. The short-term release formulas can be very beneficial for the plant, but only for a very short period of time. Generally speaking, a week to 2 weeks is the amount of time it takes for that fertilizer to be released and absorbed by the particular plant. While this does have some benefit to the plant over that short window of time, it doesn't continuously help the plant flourish throughout the remaining part of the year. In addition, the non-time release formulas can burn the roots because fertilizer is very corrosive, and if the wrong amount is applied, and depending on the weather conditions, you could have damage to your roots. So in all cases, you would avoid any type of fertilizer which is not time release. And then within the time release family of fertilizers, there are many different varieties again. The price range can go anywhere from $40 for a 10 kilogram bag up to $200 for a 10 kilogram bag. So there are many different grades of time release fertilizer, and the differences in their cost is based on how they're formulated and the type of coatings they have. The coatings is what determines how well and how consistently they release their nutrients. The particular variety that we use, again, is a commercial grade, and it's extremely effective and consistent in releasing its nutrients based on the temperature and the amount of precipitation that the plant is getting at that particular time. By doing this, you totally eliminate the guesswork as to how much to apply and when to apply it. There is no root burn with the type of variety that we use, even though this is possible with some of the cheaper time release formulas. The best time to fertilize your plants is in early May. The reason for this is that you will be getting your new growth by mid-May. The plant starts to flush out and you get your new leaves, your new evergreens. Your evergreens start to spread out, and this is when they use the most amount of nutrients, and this is when they require them to optimize their growth that particular year. A second time that you may want to consider placing fertilizer is in mid-July. With the evergreens, this will give you a little bit of an extra boost in terms of growth and color. With the deciduous trees, it will help set the buds for the following year, because deciduous trees actually set their buds during August. So the leaves you're getting next year are being prepared in August of the previous year. From everyone at Save On Plants, happy gardening and have a great day. Thank you.